Amanda gave me a helpful list.
You might want to just do
Oh,
that.
sorry.
Just for the record.
Yeah. Amanda gave me a helpful list just as a guide as what to go through. So I've been down memory lane this week looking at a lot of things I wrote in the past and looking to now as well. So it covers 80 years. So here I brought a map of England because some of you are not familiar probably with England, and I want to just point out, thanks, where I'm from. Now London is down here, and I'm up in the northwest, and there's a little place there called Lancaster. That's where I was born, and my home is just 6 miles north of Lancaster. The Scottish border is just further north, about 70 miles further north, just there. And as Jean would know, this side is Yorkshire.
It is.
Where they say, "Why?" And then this side is Lancashire, where they say, "Oh, hello, love." And the Yorkists are white roses, and the Lancastrians are red roses.
I didn't know that.
So when I went to school, I had to wear a red rose on my beret, and because we were Lancastrians, very tribal. There's a map here that's falling apart, but the little town where I live is here, just under my thumb, called Carnforth. It's in Morecambe Bay. Morecambe's just south of there. And to the north is Lake District, which is very beautiful. And then just past Kendal and Carlisle up here is Scotland. So it's not too far away. The green here is Yorkshire. Jean's country. So that's just to give you an idea where I'm from. And I can put that down as well. Now my background, Carnforth is a small railway town, and my dad was a gents hairdresser in Carnforth. In those days it was called a barber, and we lived in a terraced house on a hill, so we were near the top of the hill, and it was 2 up, 2 down, kitchen, living room, sitting room, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. No bathrooms in the 1800s when the houses were built. So my great-grandfather, who owned this house, in the late 1800s had a kitchen built at the back on an extension, and an extra bedroom and bathroom added. So we had a Victorian bathroom. The proper toilet was down the yard, through the garden, and at the end wall. And everybody in all the cottages and houses that I knew, you went through the garden to the toilet, and it was way outside the house. So whatever the weather, that's where you went. Even in the middle of the night, they had what they call, should I say, a jerry pot under the bed. And in the morning, there was a bucket, and everything was emptied into the bucket, and then that was taken down the garden to be, it's quite different. There's no flush. So there you go. So I was born during the Second World War in 1944, and at that time my father had enlisted with the the Scottish Regiment, the Caledonian Regiment, and he didn't wear a kilt. He had tartan on his shoulders here, and on his beret a piece of tartan. And he was with the Scottish Regiment for 3 years, and then he joined, they were transferred to the Royal Fusiliers, and he was a rifleman. Now when my dad went to war, he decided he would never kill anyone. He could use a rifle, but he wasn't going to aim at people. He had a lot of escapes from being shot. The bullet passed his head. Bunker was full that he was running to, and he and another man had to run to the next bunker, and the bomb fell on the first bunker and killed everyone. We were very thankful that God brought my dad home, and it wasn't easy, but everyone had to enlist and defend their country. In our home, there was no central heating, there was no washing machine. We had a copper boiler, a mangle, a dolly tub, and a copper posser.
What?
A posser, that you filled your dolly tub with cold water when you'd mangled the clothes. To rinse them, you put them in the dolly tub. And then you had a stick with a copper-domed, round metal. It was concave underneath, and it had holes through it. And you possed the clothes, that was my job, possing clothes, to rinse them, and it pushed the water through the posser and aerated the clothes, and then they had to go through the mangle again, and it was my job to turn the handle of the mangle. It was quite hard to do. So that's how we washed our clothes. There was no vacuum cleaners, no fridges, no telephones, no TVs, no fitted cupboards, no car, no wardrobe, no fitted carpets. We just had lino and a rug or a mat. The only heat was the fire in the living room. And we walked everywhere, or else we had a bicycle as well. My dad was great at cycling everywhere, including around the Lake District, and he took us everywhere with him. That was our way of getting around. There was rationing in those years for 14 years, from 1940 to 1954. So if you wanted to wash, you were allowed a small piece of soap that weighed 3 ounces, and you had to have a coupon to buy that, and from your ration book, and that was for each person per month. You could have a piece of soap. You're allowed weekly 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of tea, 2 ounces of cheese, 2 ounces of jam, which wasn't very much. And boiled sweets, they had a bit more sugar added to these, so there was 3 ounces of sweets a week allowed. And if you got or toffee or chocolate, anything like that. And the paper bags were made from a flat piece of paper, and I used to watch the lady. She made a cone out of it, twisted the bottom, and the top corner flapped over, and that's how we brought our sweets home. Women worked in industry. Women had to take over the men's jobs in the country, and on the farms as well. And children were evacuated out of all the main cities to keep them safe. Women also volunteered, and they had make, do and mend groups, because there were hardly any new clothes available. People had to keep wearing what they had, which wasn't very much anyway, because you made your own mainly. And make, do and mend groups were there to, if you wanted something mending, you could go to them and they would do it. Everything was done by hand. If you had a Singer sewing machine, that was a great blessing. I've still got my mother's one, and I've got the receipt for it, and it's over 100 years old and it works beautifully. And then women joined the army in the ATS, the Air Force in the WAFs, and the Royal Navy, they were called Wrens. And women were very much involved the whole time while the men were away. As a teenager, we weren't called teenagers, we were called young adults. And you're usually a young adult by the time you were 15, that was school leaving age. And I was given the key to the house because I was counted as responsible young adult at that time. So the key to the door to the house, in fact, in those years, many years, nobody locked the house, nobody had a bike lock, nothing was ever stolen. You could not pop in and out of the neighbours' houses and chat and look after the children, take them out and push the prams around, and you know, all the families, we were on a row of terraced houses. We were back to back with another row of terraced houses, and you just ran across the back street into each other's houses, you see. And the neighbours would pop in. There was no separation of religion, no division, should I say. No Protestant, no Catholic. We were all the same, even though people across the street went to the Catholic church, we went to the Anglican church, there was Congregational, there was Pentecostal, there was 7 different denominations in the small town I was in. But there was no sort of split division with anybody. So I could go with my friends to their church, they could come to ours. My friend and I had a great fun. Mum used to take us to Evensong, and we just when it got boring, we'd hang our noses on the pews and see how funny a face we could make. Just to cheer us up, you know. It was a bit boring for children. When I was 7, I found a resolution card. I printed it out to show you. You can look at these later on. It's a little card when I was 7 years old, because God had something more in my life than just playing with friends and, you know, enjoying life really. Even though there was a war on, people still enjoyed life. This resolution card says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." Words of Jesus. And I had signed this to say I open my heart to Christ to accept and do His will. And it was an elderly man who came to the church we went to, and once a week he had a children's meeting, and I went to that. And I remember standing up when he wanted to know if anybody wanted to open their hearts to Jesus. And I remember clearly standing up and feeling very tall, because I was quite tall for my age, and all the other children were quite small, and I felt like the odd one out, but there you go. And God had something more. That was sort of a beginning. Now, I didn't remember this. It's only that my mum never threw things away, and I just came across this recently. And also in school, I used to get a comic, 2 comics every week, and on the back page, everything was done in drawings then, with sort of bubble talk, you know, they put the words in the bubble. And they did missionary stories in the back of School Friend and Girl comic. And there was Mary Slessor I was very interested in, and Gladys Aylward. And I thought these stories were fantastic. And at school, I was in junior school, and the teacher asked if any of us wanted to be a missionary in our class. And quite a few boys stood up, and I was the only girl. But again, God was doing something. It was a heart response. And then, when I was a little bit older, we used to go to the Salvation Army. I mean, everybody went to the Salvation Army. But yeah, midweek they had these meetings, and they had bring and buy sales and all sorts of things. So it was quite a social place to go to as well. But I do remember a lady speaking, and I just wanted to go to the front. She said, "For anyone who wants to come and have prayer, come to the front." And this very elderly lady went up first and knelt down. And I thought, maybe it's just for old women. and in my heart, I was just longing to jump up and go forward. But, you know, it's just how you think as a child. You interpret it a little bit different. But again, God was at work, and God had something more. And as I got older, I got about 17, and I wanted to be confirmed, because that's what you did in the church I went to. And I felt it would be more meaningful now that I was 17 rather than when you're 10 or 11 and you don't know what's happening. I refused to go then. So I was really trying to work things out, and I became a Sunday school teacher after that. But I was full of questions, and I was really wanting to seek what was truth. And I was thinking, if there is a God, where is he? I remember being in church and thinking that, and looking all around, if God is real, where is he? And RE at school had been like a history lesson for me, and it wasn't my favourite subject. So I didn't know very much at all. Also, they had youth clubs in Carnforth where I lived. So I went to the Methodist Youth Club, where they were very friendly and they gave good teaching. I went to the Anglican Youth Club, because that was part of where I went. And I went to the Pentecostal Youth Club, 3 youth clubs in the week, because they had cream buns at the Pentecostal church. And they had this big tray, and we'd never seen anything like this. I never had cream buns in my life. So that's why I went there. But God had something more. And the big question in my mind, what is truth? And I was really searching in my heart to know more. I didn't know I had to turn to the Bible to find all the answers. And I just relied on what the Sunday school teacher's book said to teach the children, but nothing more. And God gave me this verse, "And you shall know the truth," John 8:32, "and the truth shall set you free." And when I read a little bit further, it said, "If the Son shall set you free, you will be free indeed." And that was something I had to discover. God had something more. And I really find that people who pray for us are a tremendous blessing. And because of all of you here, I really feel that over the years, someone has been praying for you, and that's why you're here tonight. And there was an elderly man who used to do his weekend shopping for him and his wife before 9 o'clock in the morning on Fridays. And every Friday morning he'd be waiting for me to come to work, and then we'd chat for half an hour while he waited for his bus. But he faithfully prayed for David and I, and then little David, and then Naomi, and we used to go and visit them as well in their home. He'd been a missionary, now he was in his 80s, and he was a lovely man of God, faithfully praying. He always said, all the time, praying for you, that God will put a hedge of fire around you. And we really felt in our early marriage, we really felt the effect and the blessing of that. And also, while I was working in a Christian bookshop, I had always been taught that someone specifically has been praying for you, and I didn't know who that was. 2 elderly ladies came in the bookshop, and they said, "Is your name Mary?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "We knew your grandmother." My grandmother was a Christian. And they said, "We've come from Morecambe and Heysham, which is about 7 or 8 miles away. We come on the bus because we heard about the bookshop and that Mary was working in the bookshop."
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "We've come to see you because we've been praying for you all these years since we met your grandmother."
Yeah.
Wasn't that amazing? I was in my 20s then. So, you know, this is how God works for us. Someone has brought this blessing into our lives because they've been praying for us. And I didn't know if anybody had been praying for me, but I was just so blessed just to meet those ladies. Never saw them again. That was the only time. And so I feel that as we get older and we have more time, this is something that God can give to us to do. You know, to bring blessing into younger people's lives. Then we come to our salvation. How did that happen? Because there wasn't much happening really in church, apart from the odd meeting now and then. And there was no Bible study or anything like that, sort of, it was more a social thing. But a lady from the Pentecostal church was a friend of my mum's, and she came and she left a book, and I have it somewhere here, I'll show it to you later. It's called Healing from Christ, and it's by an American evangelist called T.L. Osborne. And I looked at this book, it was just left lying around in the house, and I thought, if Jesus says who he says he is, and he can do now what he did then, I'm interested in this book, because the title interested me, Healing from Christ. And as I got to the 4th chapter, there was a prayer, and before the prayer it said, "Say this to the Lord." Now I was in bed at night reading this book. My mum didn't know, I picked it up. Right, I was in bed reading this, and it said, "Say to the Lord," and I thought, if it says that, that means I've got to speak it out. So I thought, right, I'll read this to God, because I glanced read it, and I really wanted in my heart to say this to God. So I said it out loud in my bedroom, and it's the first time I'd heard my voice saying a prayer. And I asked the Lord into my life. And I was so excited. I couldn't hardly believe why nobody had told me this before. You know, who else? Who is there in Carnforth who's ever thought you could say a prayer like this? I didn't know of anybody. I didn't know anything, because in those days you didn't really talk about religion at all. Yeah, they went to church and came home, and that was normal, and nobody minded, you know, because most people went to church anyway in those days. So, yeah. And I wanted to know if there was anyone else in Carnforth who'd received the Lord in this way. I was so excited I couldn't sleep. I was awake for hours and hours. I was just on a high for days. And this book told me that I had to study the Bible. I had a King James Bible given to me on my 1st birthday, which I still have, by an auntie, and who was a Christian. And I didn't know that till later on in years. And it said study the Bible, so I thought, where do I begin? And I thought, well, at school I know there was Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, so I better start at the beginning of one of them. So I began in the New Testament. And then it said, pray as much as you can, win someone for Christ, so I started sharing with people at work, attend a good church, give support to the Lord's work, that was a new thing for me, and do not become discouraged. And then it gave references for verses to memorize. So this was my beginning of being grounded into the scriptures and learning how to be a Christian. And as I was reading the New Testament, I found all these references to the Old Testament. So I started looking these up in the Old Testament, and then I was getting, it was so overwhelming, all this information. I asked the Lord to give, if there was someone in Carnforth who could teach me about what I was reading and help me to understand the scriptures, I'd be really glad if he could do that for me. I think I prayed that at the weekend. On Monday at work, a girl in the office, Anne, she said to me, she says, Mary, she said, I went to a Bible study last week. She said, would you come with me this next Monday? And I said, no, thank you. I said, I'm not interested in anything like that. No, that was me, the old me talking. And I walked out, and then I thought, what have I just prayed for? I asked God to show me, give me someone to help me understand the Bible. And I said to the Lord, I said, Lord, if she asks me again, I wasn't brave enough to go back and say I would go. I said, if she asks me again, I'll say yes. So the end of the week, she said, will you come with me on Monday? And I said, yes. So we went to Jill Briscoe's house. It was, Jill collected us in a van, and it was you sat sideways, 4 on one side. There was no seat belts then. 4 on one side, 4 on the other. And 2 people could sit in the front beside Joe. And when the teenagers got in it for the youth club, she took the seats out and you all had to stand up. And the back doors were more or less, you were pushed in and they could fasten the doors. So I tried that too, and you just sway with every bend. That teenagers loved that. And so yeah, that was my introduction. The first Bible study, ladies' Bible study I went to, it was in Joe's cottage. There was about 6 ladies and myself, and she did a Bible study, and I couldn't quite grasp what it was all about, but I was very keen to learn more. And she said, next week we're going to read the book of Ruth. She said, I want you to read it during the week, have some preparation. So I read this book, and I didn't get much from it, but when I went to the Bible study, the scriptures just opened up before me. Joe was a fantastic Bible teacher, and that was me hooked, hook, line and sinker. And I was on a high from Monday to Thursday every week. And by Thursday it was beginning to fade a bit, this excitement. And I just longed for Monday to come again, and then I could learn more. Jill and Stuart worked at a Bible school. It was only 4 miles away from where I lived, out in the country, called Capernwray Hall. And I was introduced to a lot of Christian people there. So that was the beginnings of my Christian walk. In 1969, I got very unsettled at work. It was all familiar. I was driving all over the country for a hygiene firm. I'd been with them for 7 years. And I decided I'd like to go to Bible school. So I went to Spring Bible School that year. And it was one of the best weeks of my life doing Bible school. And to hear all the lecturers and I didn't know what I was going to do. I'd left work. I had nothing in mind, but I just knew this was right. And at the end of the week, Joel's husband, Stuart, wanted to talk to me, and he invited me to work at the youth centre. Now, my job, I live on this hill, and at the top of the hill was the old church school building where my dad used to go to school, and it was taken over by the hygiene firm that I worked for, so I worked at the top of the street. At the end of the street down the hill was an old warehouse, a grain warehouse, and I remember the horses and carts and the grain coming up, the sacks being pulled up on ropes and stuff like that. And the Northwest Evangelistic Trust had bought this old empty grain warehouse, made it into a youth centre, and that was where I was going to work, at the bottom of the hill. So I just lived in the middle. It was very handy, just a small town anyway. And Stuart asked me if I'd like to work in a Christian bookshop, because that's what they wanted, to use the corner room at the end of the street. And they wanted to make it into a Christian bookshop. Now, Jill had a shoebox, and every week after the Bible study, she brought out her shoebox full of Christian books. They were her own books, and she called it her shoebox library. And I loved reading. I came to the Lord through reading a book. So all these books were building me up, and every week you could borrow one, write your name in the book, and then bring it back next week and so on. And so I remember reading, in particular, it was Jackie Pullinger's Chasing the Dragon. And I identified with her in a lot of ways. She had an Anglican background too, and she struggled with the gift of tongues and other things, and gradually she learnt. The way she explained her experience helped me to understand the gift of tongues and praying in the Spirit. I found that book very helpful indeed as a young Christian. And because I found that when I was praying, I didn't have enough words to express what was in my heart. And it was important to me that I could carry on praying even when I was busy doing other stuff and driving for the hygiene firm and so on. So while I was working in the Christian bookshop, the experience of doing this when I was in my 20s was a challenge, because my knowledge was very limited and I had a lot to learn about running a bookshop. And but when you're in your 20s, you're adaptable, you're keen to learn, and you believe that you can do it, even though you've no experience. You know, it's a great time to be enjoying life. And I enjoyed every minute of being in the bookshop, meeting the customers and chatting to them and helping them choose the right book or Bible and so on. In 1975, I got a phone call from Billy Strachan, who was one of the lecturers at Cape Mary Hall, and he said, some of the students are wanting to be baptized. He said, we're going to put water into the deep end of the swimming pool, it's just being built, and he said, we're going to use that to baptize people. He said, would you announce that at the youth club, you see? And when he told me there was going to be a baptism, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I had been longing to know how I could be baptized as an adult. I'd been christened as a baby, or they call it baptism, child infant baptism, but I had no memory or personal experience of having that I was too young to remember it. And So when Billy Strachan said this, oh yes, I was going to say yes straight away, and it was on a Monday night. That was the ladies' Bible study night. So it was up at Cape Hall in the swimming pool. They filled it with cold water because I think it was in January anyway. It was pretty cold, and they put a great huge ladder all the way down into the deep end. It was still under construction, it wasn't totally finished. And so I think I wore a t-shirt and slacks, and I kept as warm as I could till I had to go down this ladder. You know, ladders are quite wobbly. And went down in the water. And I remember the water closing right over me, totally. It was like being buried. That was my experience. And then I was raised up without me doing anything, and raised up out of the water. I just thought that was just the most fantastic experience to go through. And I went to the Bible study after, because it was just down the park in a cottage, and I just shared with the ladies, you know, what I'd just experienced. And I praise the Lord, David was baptized in the River Nore, which is even colder, some years ago, yeah. Also, very interesting, the reps used to come to the shop, and I heard one of the reps telling me about God's work in a farmer's barn in Ireland. It was up in the hills. Those hills over there, Culcullen, the Shirleys. I didn't know anything about where it was or who or the names or anything, but he had been there, and he was really excited about what he'd witnessed up on Shirley's barn. That's my background and my salvation. Right, the next one on your list was marriage.
Oh, right.
So I found this.
Oh.
It says marrying a farm. Dear Mag, this is into a magazine. It's just a lady writing in. She says, my advice to any girl about marrying a farmer is don't. Unless she is willing to marry the farm as well. For a farmer and his farm are absolutely inseparable, aren't they, John? or should be. And by the farm, I mean quite literally the whole farm. Every stick and stone of it, the mud, the hay, the straw, the manure, and in harvest time, enough clay and corn upstairs to start a plot of corn under the bed. And machinery, I should mention as well. And the magazine replied, good advice, it's clear that you know what you're talking about. So yeah, we met in 1975. And I was, at that time, 29 years old. Most of my friends were married. I'd been around them all for holidays, and I had a week's holiday to come in 1975 in September, and didn't know where to go. And I was asking the Lord, what shall I do for this week's holiday? And I picked up a Crusade magazine, and it had an advert for the Christian Week in Filey, which is on the east coast of England. And so I went there on my own with a book to read, and I didn't know he was there. But this is the place where we met. There were 7,000 people, Butlins holiday camp. And I was in the second sitting for everything, so you couldn't get into a lot of places because they couldn't seat all 7,000 people together. So we were missing out. But in the middle of the week, on the Wednesday, the police from the Christian police from the north of Ireland were doing the variety show in the evening. And they came round the dining room in second sitting and gave us all a ticket so that we would be able to go in through the stage door at the front, and it would be roped off, and we'd have a seat for the first time that week. So I remember standing in the queue with my ticket, and I asked the Lord, where should I sit? And as I walked in, all the seats were empty, practically, and there was just one man sitting at the end of a row with a big usher badge. I thought, oh, I'll sit next to him, somebody to chat to. And as I got to him, he looked up at me and he said, excuse me, he said, would you mind sitting beyond the two men in the middle of the row? So I said, okay. So I walked along, got to the first man, and I thought, why can't I sit here? No, he's told me to sit beyond the two. Now, there was nobody else. The row was empty except for these two men. All the rows in front were empty, the rows behind were empty. And that's where I had to sit. And I thought, no, I've asked the Lord where should I sit, and I've been told where to sit. So I sat down next to this man. And we chatted, hardly looked at him, but he had a nice voice. And we watched the variety show, which was very good, and the Christian Police and so on. And at the end, my program, I had the adult program, and that was the end of the evening, according to my program. But when I went out to the aisle, this young man was waiting for me, that I've been chatting to all evening, and he said, I'm going to the young people's group, and Dave Pope was singing, and he said, I've come with a group from Ireland, and would you like to come with me? So I said, okay. So the old street lights, you had this dim light every few yards with darkness in the middle. So, you kind of managed to see your way. And then he introduced me to about 30 young people, and he knew them all, and he was related to most of them. This was so confusing. I didn't even ask him his name. And then we listened to Dave Pope, and then at midnight it was all over. So we went back, and as we were walking along this avenue, I saw the steps going up to my chalet, and I said, oh, this is where I'm staying. And I just said good night and walked up the stairs to my chalet. And I said to the Lord, that was really nice to talk to somebody. And I said, if you want me to meet him again, you'll have to do it. Because, it's just impossible to find somebody in 7,000 people. And that night I was reading Isaiah, and every verse was jumping off the page to me. And God was really confirming something about this person that I'd met. I even read his name and didn't really know it was his name. And the next day, I was up on the balcony, last as usual, and looking down on the rest of the main group, and I thought, I think that's him. And I thought, I'll work out. And I worked out which entrance he would leave, went downstairs at the end, waited and waited and waited. He never came through. And that was so disappointing. And I said to the Lord, right, that's it. Went off, went horse riding in the afternoon on my own, and got back to the camp, got myself ready for the evening meal. Found I was late. I was dashing up the avenue, and the avenue opposite, there was two men walking down, and then they turned that way to the dining area, and I thought, I think that tall one is him. So they were over there, like the window, and I walked along here, and so that I could look sideways, see if it really was him. And this little one, when he saw me, he said, oh, hello. He said, is your name Mary? I said, yes. He said, oh, this is David Harper, and I'm David Shirley. David's cousin from the hills, up in the farm up there. And so that was my first introduction to the name. And we went to the evening meeting after that, and the next day I had a little car, and I said I'm off to Robin Hood's Bay, favourite place of my parents. And I said to David, would you like to come with me? But I said, bring someone with you. I didn't want to be on my own with a stranger. So he brought his cousin, William, and we went off to Robin Hood's Bay. And then after that, it was the end of the week. And he said to me, he said, will you write to me? Now I had said to the Lord, Lord, if you choose someone for me as a husband, I want you to do it. I want it to be clear that it's of you. So when he said, will you write to me? I said, no. But I said, if you write to me first, I'll reply. So the next morning he was gone, and I had the most amazing peace I've ever experienced in my life when David went away. And it was just something from the Lord, I knew that. And so to cut a long story short, we exchanged addresses, we wrote letters once a week to each other. We met 4 times after that, before we were married in January 15th, 1977. And working in the bookshop, after the 4th time he came over, I asked the Lord for a wedding date. I wasn't going to see David again until we were going to be married. So I asked the Lord for a wedding date. I was sitting in the bookshop while it was quiet, and 15th of January came into mind. When David came over in September to make wedding arrangements, I had said nothing to him, because we're always told if God is working in one person, he's working in the other as well. And so driving on my day off, driving down to Lancaster to register the wedding, I said to David, when do you think we should get married? And he said, oh, sometime in January. He said it's quiet that time of the year for farming. And I thought, right, that's the right month. And I said, well, when in January? He said, oh, somewhere around the middle. And I thought, that's getting nearer. And then I said, well, do you want to put a date to that? He said, well, what about the 15th? I said, that's the date the Lord gave me. He didn't understand that, because I hadn't told him anything. But that was just confirmation to me that God was working on that. It was a perfect day. It was a Saturday. Everybody could come, so that was great. And 2.5 years before I met David, God had told me I was leaving the country. And he confirmed it in many ways, different ways. I didn't know where or when or how or why I would be leaving, but I planned to be ready, and that God would show me the way. So I had very little to bring over with me. I'd got rid of loads of stuff. And the wedding was great. And when we came back with my car, with all the bits and pieces in, we got to the customs at Dublin Port. And I had my papers when I bought the car. And they said, are these the actual papers, correct papers? I said, yeah. He said, because did you know you have to be the owner of a car for a year before you can import it? I said, no, I didn't know that. The day I bought that car was the 15th of January, 76 rather. And this was 15th of January 77 was our wedding day, exactly a year, and this was just after the honeymoon. So we just got it in time, got it so, just like the Lord, knowing the right dates. It was just amazing. So yeah, we've got 4 beautiful children, David, Naomi, Alison and Christopher, and we've got 9 grandchildren. The eldest is 21 now, and the youngest is 8, and they're a real blessing. My involvement was a total of 30 years doing Sunday school in both England and Ireland, 28 years in England and Ireland doing Bible Club, 30 years total of women's Bible studies, doing that. So life was busy and full, and there was a lot of church involvement as well. So David would fill you in with all the rest. But that's where we are. About the church plant, God has always given me this verse before I met David, and you know, I've often thought back on this one. Where you go is from Ruth 1 verse 16. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And just to conclude on that one, we've even bought our own plot. So it's signed and sealed. Just to share with you, Jude 24, that all glory goes to God, who is able to keep us from falling away and will bring us with great joy into his glorious presence without a single fault. Praise the Lord.